What if everything that has ever happened to you was something you set in motion yourself? What if the circumstances that seem to surround you like prison walls were actually the echoes of your own past thoughts and deeds, returning to you with perfect, unerring justice? And what if the power to reshape your future, your character, your destiny, your very soul, was already within you, waiting only to be claimed? That is the extraordinary promise at the heart of today's book. Welcome. Today we are entering the world of one of the most quietly profound writers of the early 20th century. His name was James Allen. Born in Leicester, England in 1864, James Allen spent much of his early life in hardship. His father died under tragic circumstances, and Allen was forced to leave school at the age of 15 to help support his family. He worked as a factory knitter, then as a private secretary, all while reading voraciously on his own time, studying philosophy, the great spiritual traditions of both East and West, and the timeless questions of how a human being ought to live. Then, in 1901, something remarkable happened. Allen walked away from conventional working life, moved with his wife to the coastal town of Ilfracombe in Devon, and devoted himself entirely to writing and contemplation. Over the next 11 years, until his early death in 1912, he produced an extraordinary body of work. Books like As a Man Thinketh, From Poverty to Power, and The Life Triumphant, books that have quietly changed millions of lives across more than a century and continue to do so today. The book we are reading together is called The Mastery of Destiny. Published in 1909, it is one of Allen's most complete and carefully constructed works. Whereas A Man Thinketh gave us the seed of his philosophy in concentrated form, The Mastery of Destiny develops that seed into a full and living tree. In these pages, Allen builds a systematic vision of how human life actually works. He shows us that there is a perfect law of cause and effect operating in the moral and mental world, just as surely as it operates in the physical universe. He teaches us that our characters are not given to us by fate, but built up by us through our own choices and deeds across vast stretches of time. He gives us practical, grounded guidance for training the will, cultivating concentration, practicing meditation, and living with purpose. And he closes with a message of deep and lasting joy. This is not a book of empty optimism. James Allen had looked at suffering directly, had lived through hardship himself, and he wrote with the honesty of a man who knew that the road upward is steep. But he also knew with absolute conviction that the road leads somewhere glorious. So let's begin. Settle in. Let these words find their way into you, and let the mastery of destiny begin. Chapter 1. Deeds, Character, and Destiny. There is a belief as old as human memory itself. The belief that our lives are shaped by some power beyond us. In every culture, in every age, men and women have looked at their lives and felt it, that sense of a great invisible hand, guiding or withholding, rewarding or punishing, seemingly without reference to what they deserved. The ancient Greeks called it fate. Others have called it providence. Others still, God. And in the common speech of ordinary people across centuries, it has been crystallized in a simple proverb. Man proposes, and God disposes. Men of contemplation, the poets, the philosophers, the great dramatists, have always paused to watch this mysterious power at work. The Greek tragedians showed heroes who received foreknowledge of their doom, took every measure to escape it, and by the very act of fleeing, walked directly into it. Shakespeare's characters closer to nature as Alan observed, had no such foreknowledge, yet still they moved, step by inevitable step, toward the destiny that was their own. Whether you know your fate or not, whether you run from it or walk toward it unaware, it comes. And so, across the centuries, humanity has held two seemingly contradictory beliefs at once. On one side, the belief in fate, in a power that cannot be resisted or redirected, that carries each life forward like a leaf on a river. And on the other side, the belief in freedom, in personal responsibility, in the power of a human being to choose, to strive, to mold their own life. Every moral teacher who has ever lived has rested their teaching on this foundation. And every human being who has ever worked and strived and persisted in the face of difficulty has declared, through their actions, if not their words, that they believe in their own freedom to shape what comes next. These two beliefs seem to stand in flat contradiction to each other. Philosophers have argued about this for centuries. The controversy between fatalism and free will, between determinism and freedom, has never been fully settled by argument alone. But James Allen saw something that the argument on either side tends to miss. He saw that both beliefs are pointing at the same truth, from opposite ends. The truth is this: there is one great law at work in human life, the law of causation, seen in its moral aspect. And this law contains both fate and free will within itself, not as contradictions, but as two aspects of single reality. Listen carefully to how Allen puts it, because this is the key to everything that follows. Man chooses a cause. That is his freedom. He cannot choose, alter, or avert the effect. That is his fate. Free will stands for the power to initiate causes, and destiny is the state of being involved in effects. In every moment of your life, you are exercising your freedom. You are choosing what to think, what to do, what to desire, what kind of person to be in this hour. That choosing is real. It is not an illusion. It is the most important thing about you. But the results of those choices, the effects that flow inevitably from those causes, those belong to a law that stands above your preferences. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot bribe it, flatter it, or appeal to it. Once a cause is set in motion, its effect follows with the calm, impersonal certainty of mathematics. And this, Allen says, is why it is literally true that man is predestined to certain ends. But the mandate was issued by the man himself. The things that seem to fall upon us from outside, the blessings we did not seek, the misfortunes we could not foresee, these are not arbitrary. They are the returning echoes of sounds we ourselves sent forth. They are the harvest, sweet or bitter, of seeds we ourselves planted, perhaps long ago, perhaps in ways we have forgotten or never understood. Now, someone might object at this point. A man might say, I did not choose my character. I was born with it. How can I be responsible for what flows from a nature I never asked for? Allen addresses this directly, and his answer is one of the most striking ideas in the book. Characters, he says, are not given ready-made at birth. They are evolved. They are built up deed by deed, thought by thought, across vast stretches of time. The character a person brings into this life is the accumulated result of everything they have ever chosen, through innumerable lives and ages of experience. Every time you act, you modify your character. Every modification of character carries within it the seeds of new destinies, new circumstances, new conditions, new encounters that will correspond with absolute precision to the nature of what has been built. Character, Alan says, is destiny itself. And this transforms everything. Because if character is built by deeds and destiny flows from character, then destiny is ultimately built by deeds. And deeds are chosen by you moment by moment, in the only moment you ever truly have, which is this one. He gives a vivid and searching illustration of this at work in ordinary life. Consider a man who is out of work. He is honest. He is not lazy. He wants to find employment, and he cannot. Where is the justice in that? Alan asks us to look further back. There was a time in this very man's life when he had plenty of work, more than he wanted. He felt burdened by it. He shirked it. He dreamed of having nothing to do, of leisure, of ease. He did not appreciate what he had. And now, the condition he aimed for has arrived. He has nothing to do. The fruit he thought would taste sweet has turned to ashes in his mouth. But here is the equally important other half of the story. Because now this man is learning his lesson thoroughly. He is learning that habitual ease is degrading, that to have nothing to do is a condition of wretchedness, not a bliss. That work is noble and blessed, and his present desire, his genuine, wholehearted reaching after employment, is already setting new causes in motion, causes whose effects will just as surely bring about their own result when the time is ripe. Nothing comes unbidden, Alan says. Where the shadow is, there also is the substance. This principle holds not only for individuals, but for nations. Nations become great when their leaders are just men. They fall when justice passes away. The prosperity or decline of an entire civilization is, at bottom, a matter of character, the collective character of the men and women who compose it. And above all of this, serene, unerring, impersonal as mathematics, stands a great law, meting out to every mortal exactly what they have earned, with complete justice and without the slightest error. Life, Alan says, is a great school for the development of character, and all of us, through struggle and strife, through vice and virtue, through success and failure, are slowly but surely learning the lessons of wisdom. Not one of those lessons is wasted. Not one moment of honest effort is lost. The harvest comes. Always. Chapter 2, The Science of Self-Control. We live in a scientific age. Alan wrote those words in 1909, and they are even more true today than they were then. The world around us is saturated with science, with the achievements of minds that have bent themselves patiently and systematically to the understanding and mastery of the physical world. The results are everywhere, in our homes, in our streets, in the devices we carry in our pockets, in the medicines that save lives, and the technologies that span continents. And yet, Alan says, for all this extraordinary outward achievement, there is one science that has fallen almost entirely into neglect. A science that is not only equal in importance to all the other sciences combined, but without which all the other sciences become dangerous. Tools for selfishness, engines of destruction rather than instruments of human flourishing. That science is the science of self-control. The modern scientist, Alan observes, studies the elements and forces that exist outside himself with the aim of controlling and using them. The ancients pursued the complementary and deeper inquiry. They studied the elements and forces that existed within themselves with the aim of controlling and using those. And from that inner inquiry arose the great spiritual masters of humanity, figures so extraordinary in their understanding and their power that To this day, vast religious traditions are built upon their names and their achievements. Wonderful as the forces in external nature are, Allen says, they are vastly inferior to the combination of intelligent forces that make up the mind of a human being. The forces of the mind dominate and direct the blind mechanical forces of nature. Therefore, to understand, control, and direct the inner forces of passion, desire, will, and intellect is to be in possession of the destinies of men and nations. This is a breathtaking claim. But Allen makes it calmly, because for him it follows as surely as any scientific deduction. He then draws a careful parallel between the steps by which a natural scientist acquires knowledge and the steps by which the student of self-control acquires the same. The natural scientist begins with observation. He does not rush to conclusions. He looks at the facts of nature closely, persistently, again and again, until the patterns begin to emerge. Then comes experiment. He takes those observed facts and puts them through rigorous processes of testing, separating what is useless from what is true, what is apparent from what is real. Then classification. He gathers and organizes his verified facts, arranging them in ways that begin to reveal some underlying law, some hidden principle that binds them together. Then deduction. From the classified facts, he draws out the laws themselves, the invariable modes of action that govern the behavior of things. And finally, knowledge. He knows, not as a matter of opinion or belief, but as a matter of proven, tested, demonstrated understanding. He is a scientist. But even knowledge, Allen says, is not the final step. Beyond knowledge is use, the right and unselfish application of what has been learned to the benefit of the world. The true scientist gives freely what years of labor have earned. Now, the student of self-control follows exactly the same path, but turned inward. The first step is introspection. Instead of turning the searchlight of attention outward onto the facts of nature, the student of self-control turns it inward onto the facts of his own mind. He observes with scrupulous care the subtle, ever-shifting processes of thought, desire, emotion, and impulse that constitute his inner life. He steps aside, as it were, from the hurrying stream of pleasures and ambitions, and watches himself from a slight distance. This, Allen says, is the very beginning of self-control, because up until this point, the man has simply been carried along by his nature, as a leaf is carried by a current, without awareness, without choice, without real power. The moment he turns and observes, the moment he ceases merely to react and begins to watch and understand, he has begun to exert a check upon himself. He has begun to move from being controlled toward doing the controlling. The second step is self-analysis. Having observed the tendencies of the mind, the student now examines them closely. He begins to separate what is harmful from what is beneficial, what produces pain from what produces peace. He traces each tendency to its particular actions, and each action to its inevitable results. It is a rigorous process of testing and proving. The third step is adjustment. By this stage, the student stands face to face with himself, and there is nowhere left to hide. He sees his weaknesses with clear eyes. He sees his strengths without false modesty. He no longer flatters himself or condemns himself. He simply sees himself as he is. And from that clear seeing, he begins the work of adjustment. Like a farmer who weeds and prepares the ground before sowing, he removes the habitual patterns of thought that produce harm and begins to cultivate those that produce health and peace. The fourth step is righteousness. Having adjusted his thoughts and deeds in accordance with the minor laws of mental life, the student begins to perceive a greater law underlying all the lesser ones, a law as supreme in the world of mind as gravity is in the physical world. This is the law of justice, of righteousness, of right action. And now, instead of acting from the promptings of self, from desire, from habit, from impulse, he subordinates all of his thoughts and deeds to this central principle. He does what is right, universally and eternally right, regardless of what is comfortable or convenient. He is no longer a slave to his nature. He is its master. The fifth step is pure knowledge. By thinking rightly and acting rightly, over time, the student proves through his own living experience the existence of the divine law on which the mind is framed. He reaches the point where it may be said of him, as of the great natural scientist, that he knows. He has mastered the science of self-control. He has brought order out of confusion, knowledge out of ignorance. And beyond even this fifth step lies wisdom, the pouring out of all that has been learned freely and generously into the service of the world. Alan closes this chapter with a thought both searching and encouraging. The man who has not turned inward control and purify his nature cannot clearly distinguish between good and evil, between right and wrong. He reaches for pleasure and recoils from pain, stumbling toward wisdom only through the repeated shock of suffering. But the man who practices self-control, moving step by step through these 5 stages of inner growth, gains a knowledge that enables him to act from a moral law that sustains the universe. He knows good and evil. He knows right and wrong. And, knowing, he lives accordingly. For such a man, Alan says, evil is ended and good is all in all. Chapter 3. Cause and Effect in Human Conduct. Every scientist in the world knows that every effect is related to a cause. This is not a controversial claim in the physical sciences. When a ball drops, it falls because gravity pulled it. When a flame touches wood, the wood burns because combustion is the effect of that cause. When planets move in their orbits, they do so in precise accordance with mathematical laws that have not deviated by a fraction since the beginning of the universe. Perfect harmony prevails throughout the physical cosmos, from the speck of dust to the greatest sun in the sidereal universe with its millions of rolling stars, in the natural world with its infinite variety of life. There is exquisite, unfailing order. And this order could not exist for a single instant if cause and effect were ever separated, if a result could be different from what the causes demanded it to be. Alan says, apply this same axiomatic truth to the realm of human conduct, and what is revealed is the principle of justice. All the varying conditions of human life, all the differences in wealth and poverty, in health and sickness, in happiness and misery, in reputation and disgrace, are the result of this law of cause and effect, operating with the same perfect consistency in the moral world that operates in the physical one. Man can choose what causes he sets in motion. He can decide what thoughts he will think and what deeds he will do. That is his freedom and his dignity. But he has no power over the results of those thoughts and deeds. Those are regulated by the overruling law, and they are irrevocable. Evil thoughts and deeds produce conditions of suffering. Good thoughts and deeds produce conditions of blessedness. The moment a man fully grasps this truth, not merely as an intellectual proposition, but as a living reality at the center of his understanding, everything becomes simple. The crooked paths straighten out. The heights of wisdom come into view. The open door to liberation from suffering is perceived and entered. Alan uses 2 memorable comparisons here, and both are worth sitting with. The first is an arithmetic problem. Life, he says, is like a complex sum in arithmetic. To the student who has not yet grasped the key to its correct solution, it appears bewildering, contradictory, impossibly difficult. Nothing seems to add up. But once the key is found and laid hold of, the very same problem that was formerly baffling becomes astonishingly clear. Because there is only one way to do the sum correctly, even though there are hundreds of ways to do it wrong. And when the right way is found, the student knows it. The perplexity vanishes. The answer is certain. So in life, the presence of doubt, perplexity, and unhappiness are sure indications that the right way has not yet been found. They are not punishments from outside. They are the internal indicators of some being worked wrongly. And no amount of wishing it were otherwise, no amount of cleverness or self-deception can alter the result. Twice 5 will make 10 to all eternity, and no degree of ignorance or delusion can bring the result up to 11. The second comparison is a piece of cloth. Look at a piece of woven fabric from a distance, and you see simply a piece of cloth, but examine it closely, and you discover that it is made of individual threads, each pursuing its own path through the weave, each related to all the others but never confused with them. It is precisely this individual distinctness, maintained throughout the whole complex weave, that makes it a piece of cloth at all. Without it, you would have only a tangled heap of fibers. Life is like this cloth, and individual human lives are the threads. Each thread follows its own course. Each individual suffers or enjoys the consequences of their own deeds, not the deeds of another. And the counterbalancing effect of every cause is always an exact ratio to the initiatory impulse. Always, without exception, without delay that is anything but apparent. You cannot weave a strong, beautiful cloth from shoddy thread. And you cannot build a good life from selfish thoughts and careless deeds. Each thought, each action, is another thread, shoddy or genuine, woven into the garment of your life. And as you make the garment, so must you wear it. But here Allen makes a point of breathtaking practical importance. He says that there is a sense in which cause and effect are not even separated in time, that they form a single, simultaneous whole. The moment a man thinks a cruel thought, he is already, in that same instant, injured his own mind. He is not the same man he was the moment before. He is a little viler and a little more unhappy, even if nothing in his outer circumstances has yet changed. A pattern of such thoughts, sustained over time, produces a cruel and wretched man, not as a future punishment, but as a present and ongoing reality. The reverse is equally true. The moment a man thinks a kind thought or does a kind deed, something shifts in him immediately. A quiet nobility and happiness attend it. He is better than he was. A pattern of such thoughts and deeds, sustained over time, produces a great and blissful soul. What man thinks, that he does. What he does, that he is. If a man is perplexed or unhappy or restless or wretched, let him look to himself, not to his circumstances, not to his neighbors, not to government or the economy or the weather or his past or his stars, to himself, because there and nowhere else is the source of all his trouble, and there and nowhere else is the source of all his remedy. Chapter 4, Training of the Will. Without strength of mind, nothing worthy of accomplishment can be done. This is Allen's opening declaration in this chapter, and it deserves to be read slowly. Without strength of mind, not without talent, not without opportunity, not without luck or connections or favorable circumstances. Without strength of mind, nothing worthy can be done. The cultivation of that steadfastness and stability of character that is commonly called willpower is, Allen says, one of the foremost duties of a human being. It is necessary both to earthly well-being and to spiritual growth. Without it, a man is wretched and dependent on others for support that ought to come from within himself. Now here, Allen does something quite remarkable for his time. He strips away the mystification. In the years when he was writing, there was already a thriving industry of occult self-help, of advertisements promising to sell secret methods for gaining willpower at so many dollars per course, methods shrouded in mystery and surrounded by impressive language. Allen dismisses all of this firmly and without ceremony. Nothing, he says, could be further removed from secrecy and mystery than the actual practical methods by which strength of will is developed. The true path of will cultivation is found in the common, everyday life of the individual. It is so obvious and so simple that most people, looking for something complicated and impressive, walk straight past it without noticing. The whole science of developing the will, Allen says, is contained in 7 rules. And these 7 rules are not exotic or abstruse. They are deeply practical and immediately actionable for any human being wherever they stand. The first rule is to break off bad habits. This is, Allen acknowledges, no easy task. It demands a putting forth of great efforts, perhaps a long succession of efforts. But it is precisely through these efforts that the will is strengthened. If a man refuses to take this first step, if he submits to his bad habits because of the immediate pleasure they afford, he forfeits the right to rule himself and remains, so far, a weak slave. No occult secret can compensate for the absence of this first, foundational self-discipline. The second rule is to form good habits. The strength gained by breaking bad habits is what makes this possible. While breaking a bad habit requires strength of purpose, forming a new good one requires the intelligent direction of that purpose. A man must be mentally active and energetic, and must keep constant watch over himself. But with practice, good habits take root, and what was once an effort will eventually become a natural expression of character. The third rule is to give scrupulous attention to the duty of the present moment. Thoroughness, Allen says, is a step in the development of will that cannot be skipped. Slipshod work is an indication of weakness. Perfection should be aimed at, even in the smallest task. By not dividing the mind, but giving the whole attention to each separate task as it presents itself, singleness of purpose and deep concentration of mind are gradually gained. These are 2 mental powers that give weight and worth of character, and bring repose and joy to whoever possesses them. The fourth rule is to do vigorously, and at once, whatever has to be done. Idleness and a strong will cannot coexist. Procrastination is a total barrier to purposeful action. Nothing should be put off until another time, not even for a few minutes. That which ought be done now should be done now. This seems a small thing, Allen says, but its importance reaches very far indeed. It leads to strength, to success, and to peace of mind. The fifth rule is to live by rule. A man of cultivated will does not blindly gratify his passions and impulses. He schools them to obedience. He decides what he will eat and drink, how he will spend his time, when he will rest, when he will rise. He makes rules for the right governance of his conduct in every department of life, and adheres to them with discipline. To live loosely and indiscriminately carried hither and thither by appetite and inclination, is to live below the level of a rational being. The animal nature in man must be brought into subjection by training the mind and life on fixed principles of right conduct. The sixth rule is to control the tongue. A man of strong will does not allow his tongue to run thoughtlessly and without check. He practices until he has perfect command of his speech, so that he utters nothing in peevishness, anger, irritability, or with evil intent. This is both a discipline in its own right and a preparation for the seventh and greatest rule. The seventh rule is to rightly control the mind. All six of the preceding rules, faithfully practiced, lead up to this seventh. It is the most important of them all. Self-control in its deepest form means a mastery of the mind itself, the thoughts that arise, the directions in which they flow, the quality of the inner life. He who patiently practices all seven of these rules, bringing them into play in all his ways and undertakings, will learn by his own experience and effort how to train and govern the mind, and will earn thereby the supreme crown of human development, the crown of a perfectly poised will. This is not an achievement reserved for saints or philosophers. It is the natural inheritance of every human being who is willing to do the work. And the work begins not in some distant future, not when circumstances become more favorable, not after a long and elaborate preparation. It begins right here, in the ordinary circumstances of today. Chapter 5, Thoroughness. Thoroughness consists in doing little things as though they were the greatest things in the world. That sentence alone is worth carrying through an entire life. Allen's conviction here flows directly from his understanding of how the universe is built. Every great thing without exception, is composed of small things brought together with care and precision. The great things of the world exist because the small things that constitute them were attended to faithfully. Remove the attention to small things, and the great things simply cease to exist. The majority of human failures, Allen says, spring from neglecting the apparently insignificant details. It is a common error to suppose that the big picture is what matters and the small particulars can be passed over. But a brief, honest look at how anything of lasting value is actually made will correct that error quickly. Nothing great can exist which is not built of small details, each one attended to with care. Every employer of labor, Allen observes, knows how comparatively rare the quality of thoroughness is. Bad workmanship is common. Skill and excellence are acquired by few. Thoughtlessness, carelessness, and laziness are such ordinary vices that it ought not to surprise anyone when capable people find it difficult to fill positions that require nothing more than forethought, energy, and conscientious care. And those who do careless work today will, in a future hour of necessity, look for work and find none, not as an arbitrary punishment, but as a natural and inevitable effect of causes they themselves put in motion. The law of the survival of the fittest, Allen says, is not based on cruelty. It is based on justice. Vice is corrected by the natural consequences of its own operation. If it were not so, how could virtue ever be developed? The thoughtless and lazy cannot take precedence of the thoughtful and industrious, because the thoughtful and industrious produce more of what the world needs and values. The root cause of the widespread lack of thoroughness, Allen identifies clearly. It is the thirst for pleasure, not pleasure in itself, which has its own proper place in time, but the habit of allowing thoughts of anticipated pleasure to flood into mind during hours that ought to be devoted to work and duty. Two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time, and a mind occupied with pleasure cannot also be concentrated upon the perfect performance of duty. Those who are always dwelling on anticipated pleasures while working can do nothing else but bungle through their tasks, and they will lose what they have when their pleasure seems to be at stake. Thoroughness is completeness, Allen says. Perfection. It means doing a thing so well that there is nothing left to be desired. It means the exercise of much thought, the putting forth of great energy, the persistent application of the mind to its task, and the cultivation of patience, perseverance, and a high sense of duty. An ancient teacher said, "If anything has to be done, let a man do it. Let him attack it vigorously." And another said, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might." And here Allen makes an observation that is challenging but worth taking seriously. He says that the quality of thoroughness matters even more than the direction in which it is applied. It is better to be a whole-souled worldling than a half-hearted religionist. It is better to give the entire mind to a lesser thing than half of it to a higher, because thoroughness leads more rapidly to the development of character and the acquisition of wisdom. Regardless of the direction, it accelerates progress. It leads the bad towards something better, and it spurs the good to higher and higher levels of usefulness and power. The message is simple and unsparing. Do not do things carelessly, dreaming of something else. Do not do things halfway, saving your real energy for later. Do not do things at less than your full capacity, imagining that the task is beneath you. Whatever the task before you, give it everything. That is how character is built. That is how destiny is shaped. And that is how the small threads of daily attention are woven into a life of lasting strength and beauty. Chapter 6. Mind Building and Life Building. Everything in nature and everything in the works of man is produced by a process of building. The rock is built of atoms. The plant, the animal, the human body are built of cells. A house is built of bricks. A book is built of letters. A city is a combination of buildings. A nation's arts and sciences and institutions are built by the accumulated efforts of individuals across generations. And always accompanying the process of building is its necessary counterpart, the process of breaking down. Old forms that have served their purpose are dismantled, and their material enters into new combinations. In living bodies, old cells are constantly breaking down, and new ones forming to replace them. In the works of man, old structures are demolished and new ones raised. These two processes in nature are called death and life. In human works, they are called destruction and restoration. And this dual process, Allen says, which obtains universally in the visible world, obtains with equal universality in the invisible world. As a body is built of cells and a house of bricks, so a man's mind is built of thoughts. The various characters of men are compounds of thoughts in varying combinations. Individual characteristics are fixed patterns of thought that have become so deeply embedded in the character that they can only be altered or removed by a protracted effort of will and much self-discipline. A character is built in exactly the same way as a tree or a house is built, by the ceaseless addition of new material. And that material is thought. Every man is a mind builder, whether he recognizes it or not. Every thought is another brick laid in the edifice of the mind. But most people lay their bricks loosely and carelessly, without attention to quality or alignment. The result is an unstable and tottering character, ready to give way under the first real pressure of difficulty or temptation. Others put into the building of their minds large numbers of impure and unhealthy thoughts. thoughts of weakness, of self-pity, of resentment, of failure. These are rotten bricks that crumble almost as fast as they are placed, leaving always an unfinished and unsheltering building. Pure thoughts, Allen says, wisely chosen and well placed, are the durable bricks of a strong mind, bracing thoughts of strength and confidence, inspiring thoughts of a large and generous and unselfish life, thoughts of duty faithfully performed and purpose steadily maintained. These are materials from which a finished and beautiful mind temple is raised. And the building of such a temple requires that old and useless habits of thought be broken down and cleared away first. Each man is the builder of himself. If he finds himself occupying a jerry-built mind that lets in the rains of trouble and the cold winds of disappointment, the solution is not to complain about the weather. It is not to blame the devil or his ancestors or his circumstances. The only solution is to take up the work of building something better. When a man wakes to a true sense of his responsibility and his power, he begins to build like a real workman, producing a character that will endure, that will afford him lasting shelter, and that will continue to offer shelter to others long after he is gone. Now, Allen draws this principle outward into the building of a life. The entire visible universe is framed on a few mathematical principles. All the wonders of human engineering and architecture rest on a handful of underlying laws. And all that there is to the making of a successful, happy, and beautiful life is the knowledge and application of few simple, root moral principles. Allen names 4 of these fundamental principles. They are justice, rectitude, sincerity, and kindness. These 4 ethical truths are to the making of a life what the 4 lines of a square are to the building of a house. If a man ignores them, if he imagines he can achieve lasting success and happiness through injustice, trickery, and selfishness, he is in the position of a builder who thinks he can raise a strong and durable structure while ignoring the laws of geometry. The structure may go up for a while. He may make money. He may think the experiment is working. But the foundation is wrong, and when a critical moment comes, as come it must, everything crumbles. The man who scrupulously observes these 4 principles in all his dealings, however, builds on a foundation that cannot be shaken. He is working in harmony with the fundamental laws of the universe. And such a man, Allen says, can no more fail of ultimate success and blessedness than the earth can fail of light and warmth so long as it keeps to its proper orbit. The key word is thorough. As in the building of a great structure, the strictest attention must be paid to every detail. So in the building of a life, the 4 moral principles must be carried into every particular, every momentary duty, every trivial transaction. The hidden foundation of integrity of heart must be laid strongly before the visible edifice is raised. And it must be laid in the small things, not only the large ones. The majority of those who fail and come to grief do so, Allen says, not because they made one catastrophic moral error, but because they neglected the apparently insignificant details. He who adopts these 4 ethical principles as the law and base of his life, who builds his character upon them in every thought and word and action, is laying down the hidden foundation of integrity of heart. And from that foundation there arises, stone by stone, a structure that will bring him honor and in which he can live in peace and blessedness, the strong and beautiful temple of his own life. Chapter 7. Cultivation of concentration. Concentration, the bringing of the mind to a center and holding it there, is vitally necessary to the accomplishment of any task. Allen calls it the father of thoroughness and the mother of excellence. It is not an end in itself, but power that serves all purposes. Like steam and mechanics, it is a dynamic force in the machinery of the mind and the functions of life. It is a common possession. Every person who has ever become absorbed in a book, or wrapped in devotion, or wholly given over to a task they cared about, has experienced concentration in some degree. And every person who has ever achieved anything of lasting worth has practiced it, whether they thought it in those terms or not. But Alan is firm about one thing. Many books and teachers of his day were surrounding the subject of concentration with mystery, offering elaborate methods for its cultivation. Fixing the eyes on the tip of the nose, or on a doorknob or a mystical symbol, or concentrating the mind on the navel or the pineal gland. Alan dismisses all of this with characteristic directness. Such methods, he says, do not cultivate concentration. They destroy it. They lead toward weakness and mental dispersion, not toward power and intelligence. He had seen people whose natural capacity for concentration had been squandered by such practices, leaving them prey to weak and wandering minds. Concentration is an aid to the doing of something. It is not the doing of something in itself. A latter has no value in and of itself, but only insofar as it enables you to reach what you could not otherwise reach. Concentration is the same, of itself, separated from actual work and purpose. It is a dead thing. The task of the hour contains everything necessary for the cultivation of concentration, whether that task is the pursuit of divine knowledge or the sweeping of a floor. What concentration actually is the bringing of a well-controlled mind to the doing of what has to be done. The great enemy of concentration is the wavering, wandering, undisciplined mind. Scattered and diffused thoughts are weak and worthless, but thoughts marshaled, commanded, and directed upon a given point become invincible. Confusion gives way before them. Doubt dissolves. Difficulty yields. Concentrated thought enters into all genuine successes and informs all real victories. There is no secret about its acquisition beyond the universal principle practice. To be able to do a thing, you must begin to do it and keep doing it until it is mastered. This principle prevails everywhere, in all arts and sciences and disciplines. To paint, one must paint. To become learned, one must learn. To become wise, one must do wise things. And to successfully concentrate the mind, one must concentrate the mind. The beginning of concentration is this. Go to your daily task and put your mind on it. Bring all your intelligence and mental energy to a focus on what has to be done. And every time you notice the thoughts drifting away, bring them promptly and firmly back to the thing in hand. The center on which you are to bring your mind is not some mystical point in space. It is the work you're doing right now, and your object is to do that work with smooth rapidity and consummate skill. Alan then describes 4 stages through which concentration deepens. In order, the first stage is attention. The thoughts are arrested. The mind is brought to rest upon the task. This alone, fully developed, leads to usefulness. The second stage is contemplation. The mind awakens into vigorous thought about the task, considering how to proceed, turning the matter over with energy and engagement. This leads to skill, ability, and talent. The third stage is abstraction. The mind becomes so wholly absorbed in the work that the doors of the senses close against outside distraction. The worker is present to the work alone, oblivious to the surrounding world, operating from a subjective state of intense interactivity. This is the threshold of genius. In the first 2 stages, The mind and the work are still somewhat separate, and the work is done with a degree of friction. In abstraction, a union takes place. The work and the mind become one, and the result is a superior efficiency achieved with far less effort. Inventors, artists, poets, scientists, philosophers, all the great men and women of genuine originality are men and women of abstraction. The fourth stage is activity in repose. Alan searches for words to describe this condition and settles on that paradoxical phrase, activity in repose. He uses the image of a spinning top at full velocity. When a top spins at its maximum speed, friction reduces to its minimum, and the top appears perfectly still, perfectly stable. What a schoolboy calls a top that is asleep. It is not inert. It is the rest of perfectly balanced, perfectly intense activity. So the mind that has achieved perfect concentration when engaged in the most intense productive thought is in a state of quiet poise and calm repose. The face of such a man, in the midst of his deepest concentration, becomes radiantly calm, more sublimely still, as the inner activity becomes more intense. This leads to mastery, power, and the capacity to lead and teach others. And from this perfection of concentration, Alan says, there flows naturally toward what he will explore in the next chapter, the higher form of concentrated attention that he calls meditation, in which the mind becomes divinely illumined and begins to acquire knowledge of a different and deeper kind. But for now, the invitation is simply this. Begin where you are, with the task in front of you, with the work of this present moment. Bring the full force of your mind to it. When the thoughts wander, bring them back. Do this with patience and with consistency, day after day. And in time, you will discover in yourself a quality of attention, a steadiness of mind, a capacity for deep and focused work that will expand your usefulness, open higher opportunities, and bring you the genuine joy of a fuller and wider life. Chapter 8. Practice of Meditation. When aspiration is united to concentration, the result is meditation. This is how Alan opens this chapter, and it is a definition worth sitting with in silence for a moment. Aspiration alone, without concentration, produces nothing more than longing, beautiful but ineffective. Concentration alone, without aspiration, produces skill and power in the service of whatever the individual happens to want, which may or may not be worthy. But when a man aspires with every fiber of his being towards something higher, something truer, something more real and more lasting than the ordinary world can offer, and brings to that aspiration a full, disciplined focus of a trained mind, the result is something qualitatively different from either aspiration or concentration alone. The result is meditation. Without intense aspiration, Alan says, there can be no meditation. Lethargy and indifference are fatal to its practice. The more intense the nature of a man, the more deeply he feels, the more urgently he desires, the more passionately he reaches toward truth, the more readily will he enter the meditative state, once his aspirations have been awakened in the right direction. The relationship between concentration and meditation is one of direction, not of nature. Concentration brings a full power of the mind to bear upon things of this world, in the service of skill, knowledge, and worldly accomplishment. Meditation brings that same power to bear upon the search for truth itself, for divine knowledge, for the inner life of wisdom and purity and peace. By concentration, a man may reach the highest peaks of genius. By meditation, he may reach the divine wisdom and perfect peace of a fully enlightened mind. The perfection of concentration is power. The perfection of meditation is wisdom. Saints, sages, saviors, the wise men and divine teachers of all ages are the finished products of holy meditation. Meditation is more difficult to practice than concentration, Allen says, because it demands a much more thorough self-discipline. A man can learn concentration without purifying his heart and his life. But meditation is inseparable from purification. You cannot sincerely reach toward truth while maintaining habits of thought and action that contradict it. The two things are incompatible, and the attempt to combine them produces neither genuine concentration nor genuine meditation, only a kind of spiritual restlessness. The principle of meditation rests on two foundations. The first is the purification of the heart through repetitive dwelling on pure thoughts. Man is a thought being. His character is determined by the thoughts he habitually dwells on. Thoughts practiced repeatedly tend to repeat themselves with increasing ease, becoming fixed habits of mind. By daily returning the mind to pure, elevated, and generous thoughts, the meditator gradually forms a habit of pure and enlightened thinking, which in turn produces pure and enlightened actions. By ceaseless repetition of what is best, he at last becomes one with it. The second foundation is the embodiment of that purity in practical life. Meditation is not an escape from life. It is a preparation for living it more fully and more rightly. The knowledge gained in even half an hour of genuine early morning meditation must be embodied and practiced throughout the whole day. In meditation, the entire life of a man is involved, and as he advances in his practice, he becomes stronger, calmer, holier, and wiser. Allen makes a careful and important distinction here between meditation and reverie. They look similar from the outside. Both involve a man sitting apart from activity, apparently absorbed in thought, but internally they are as different as night and day. Reverie is a loose dreaming into which a man falls. Meditation is a strong, purposeful thinking into which a man rises. Reverie is easy and pleasurable. Meditation is at first difficult and demanding. Reverie thrives in indolence and luxury. Meditation arises from strenuousness and discipline. Reverie begins as alluring, becomes sensuous, and ends in sensuality. Meditation begins as forbidding, becomes profitable, and ends in peace. Reverie undermines self-control. Meditation establishes it. The indications of reverie are a desire to avoid exertion, a desire to experience pleasures without effort, an increasing distaste for duty and responsibility, a fear of consequences, a wish for reward without labor, and a lack of self-control. The indications of genuine meditation are precisely the opposite: an increase of both physical and mental energy, a strenuous striving after wisdom, a decreased reluctance in performance of duty, a fixed determination to fulfill all responsibilities faithfully, freedom from fear, indifference to riches, and a growing possession of self-control. Allen gives detailed practical guidance on the conditions under which meditation is possible, difficult, and most accessible, and it is worth noting the pattern that emerges from all of it. Ease, luxury, and physical indulgence make meditation impossible. A heavy meal, a soft bed, the idle middle of the afternoon, a luxurious room, gay or flamboyant clothing. These all work against the meditative state, because they incline the mind toward reverie rather than aspiration. But strenuousness, simplicity, and self-discipline create the conditions in which meditation is natural. Early morning, before the day has imposed its noise and its demands. Solitude, plain surroundings, a hard seat rather than a soft one, the body at its peak of energy rather than fatigued or overfed. The body, Allen emphasizes, is a vehicle for the meditative effort and must be in good condition for it. It should be neither starved nor overfed, neither exhausted nor flabby. Holding the mind to a concentrated train of subtle and lofty thought requires a high degree of both physical and mental vitality. And there is one practical technique Allen commends for entering the meditative state: the mental repetition of a beautiful sentence, a lofty precept, or a verse of poetry that speaks directly to one's own condition, not mechanical, rote repetition, but a loving dwelling on words that resonate deeply, that point toward what the meditator genuinely aspires to. When aspiration and concentration harmoniously combine in this way, the state of meditation arises naturally, without undue strain. Those who faithfully follow these instructions, Allen promises, and who strive and persevere through the initial difficulties, will not fail to gather, in due season, the harvest of purity, wisdom, bliss, and peace. They will eat of the sweet fruits of holy meditation. Chapter 9, The Power of Purpose. Dispersion is weakness. Concentration is power. What is true in the physical world? That scattered energy is impotent and gathered energy is irresistible, is equally true in the world of mind and will. Purpose, Allen says, is highly concentrated thought. It is the bringing of all mental energies to bear upon a single object, sustained through time against obstacles, in the face of opposition, without surrender. And the man who has purpose has something that no adversity can permanently defeat, because obstacles, for such a man, do not diminish his resolve. They intensify it. Purpose is the keystone in the temple of achievement. It binds and holds together all the other qualities: the concentration, the thoroughness, the trained will, the disciplined mind, into a complete and functional whole. Without it, all these qualities remain scattered and ineffective. With it, they become invincible. Empty whims, ephemeral fancies, vague desires, and half-hearted resolutions have no place in purpose. They are the opposite of purpose. They are the marks of a mind that has not yet grown to its full stature. All successful men and women are men and women of purpose. They hold fast an idea, a project, a plan. They cherish it and brood upon it, and tend it and develop it. When assailed by difficulties, they refuse to be beguiled into surrender. And the more formidable the obstacle encountered, the more intense the purpose becomes. The men and women who have shaped the destinies of humanity have been mighty of purpose, like the Roman engineer laying his road, following a fixed line, refusing to swerve for any terrain. They have kept to their course even when torture and death confronted them. The great leaders of the race are the mental road builders, and humanity follows in the intellectual and spiritual paths they have carved. Allen points to two kinds of great purpose, and the contrast is illuminating. In an Alexander, a Caesar, or a Napoleon, we see the power of purpose directed through worldly and personal channels. It is staggering in its force. It reshapes empires. But in Confucius, a Buddha, or a Christ, we perceive the vaster power of purpose when its course runs through heavenly and impersonal paths. The worldly conqueror shapes the map for a generation. The spiritual teacher shapes the inner life of humanity for centuries and millennia. Purpose goes with intelligence. Greater minds hold greater purposes. A weak intelligence drifts without direction. A developed mind always moves toward something. The drifting mind, Allen says, is an argument for undevelopment. What can resist an unshakable purpose? What can stand against it or turn it aside? Inert matter yields to a living force, and circumstance itself succumbs to the energy of sustained, determined will. The man of unlawful purpose will, in achieving his ends, destroy himself. But the man of good and lawful purpose cannot fail. He needs only to daily renew the fire of his fixed resolve, and his object will be consummated. 3 types of men fail to achieve great purposes. The weak man, who grieves because he is misunderstood, will not greatly achieve. The approval of others is too important to him, and when it is withheld, his purpose wavers. The vain man, who steps aside from his resolve to please others and gain their approbation, will not highly achieve. He wants the destination, but he wants the applause on the way more. The double-minded man, who seeks to compromise his purpose, to achieve it while also managing to avoid the cost it demands, will fail. But the man of fixed purpose, who, whether misunderstandings and foul accusations rain down upon him, or flatteries and fair promises tempt him, does not yield a fraction of his resolve. This man is a man of excellence and achievement, of success, greatness, power. Hindrances stimulate such a man. Difficulties nerve him to renewed exertion. Mistakes, losses, and pains do not subdue him. Failures are not defeats. They are steps in the ladder of success, each one teaching something, each one clearing ground, each one bringing him closer, because he is ever conscious of the certainty of final achievement. All things at last yield to the silent, irresistible, all-conquering energy of purpose. Allen closes this chapter by drawing on the poem Invictus, that great declaration of the unconquerable human spirit, the soul that refuses to be mastered by circumstance, that holds its head unbowed under the bludgeonings of chance, that knows itself to be the master of its fate and the captain of its soul. This is a soul that has found purpose, and nothing in the universe can ultimately defeat it. Chapter 10, The Joy of Accomplishment. Joy is always the accompaniment of a task successfully accomplished. This is Allen's final chapter, and it is in many ways the crown of everything that has come before. When a piece of work is done, when an undertaking is completed, there comes a rest and satisfaction that is not merely relief at the ending of effort. It is something deeper. It is the joy of having added something real to the world, of having brought a possibility into actuality, of having been, for a time, fully alive in the exercise of one's powers. Of all miserable men, Allen says, the shirker is the most miserable. He thinks to find ease and happiness in avoiding difficult duties and necessary tasks. He believes that if he can just sidestep the demands that require genuine effort, he will arrive at some pleasant resting place. But the reverse is true. The mind of the shirker is always uneasy and disturbed. He becomes burdened with an inward sense of shame. He forfeits manliness and self-respect. He perishes, first in his character, and eventually in his circumstances and his body. Life and action are synonymous, Allen says, and the moment a man tries to escape exertion, physical or mental, he has begun to decay. On the other hand, those who are energetic, those who exercise their powers fully, who take on difficulties and wrestle with them, who bring tasks to completion and then reach the next, increase in life with every effort. Alan draws a series of vivid images of this joy of accomplishment across different domains of human effort. There is a child, face alight with happiness, who has finally mastered the school lesson that was long and hard. There is the athlete who trained through months or years of discipline and strain, arriving on the day of contest with the health and strength that all that training built, and carrying home the prize to the rejoicings of friends. There is the scholar who, after many years of ungrudging toil, finds himself in possession of advantages and powers that learning alone can bestow. There is the businessman who has grappled incessantly with difficulties and setbacks, sustained by nothing but purpose and conviction of eventual success, who one day sits in a happy assurance of well-earned achievement. There is a gardener who has contended with stubborn soil through long seasons, and at last sits down to eat the fruits of his labor. Every successful accomplishment, even in worldly things, is repaid with its own measure of joy. And in spiritual things, in the life of character building and inner development, the joy that attends genuine achievement is not temporary or surface level. It is sure, deep, and abiding. Great is the joy, Alan says, that comes when, after innumerable apparently unsuccessful attempts, some ingrained fault of character is at last cast out to trouble its former owner no more. The moment of that conquest is a moment of liberation, and the joy that accompanies it does not pass away. It becomes an integral part of the spiritual nature, a permanent expansion of who the person is. All life is a struggle. Both without and within, there are conditions against which a human being must contend. Existence itself is a series of efforts and accomplishments, and a person's right to remain among others as a useful member of humanity depends upon the measure of their capacity for wrestling successfully with what life presents. But the demand that is made upon us, the demand that we continue to strive after better things, after greater perfection, after higher and still higher achievements, is not a demand that diminishes us. It is a demand that honors us. It is the universe's way of calling forth what is greatest in us. And in proportion as we obey that demand, as we remain willing to learn, eager to know, ready to put forth genuine effort, the angel of joy attends our footsteps. First in little things, then in greater, and then in greater still must a person strive, until at last, prepared by all that practice and discipline and effort, he is ready to make the supreme effort to strive for the accomplishment of truth itself, and succeeding in that, he will know the eternal joy. The price of life is effort. The acme of effort is accomplishment. The reward of accomplishment is joy. Blessed is the man who strives against his own selfishness. He will taste, in its fullness, the joy of accomplishment. And so we reach the end of The Mastery of Destiny by James Allen. Take a moment, before we part, to let what you have heard settle in. This is not a book that yields all of its treasure on a single reading. It is a book that grows with you. Return to it. Sit with it. Let its ideas travel with you into the ordinary days of your life, where they were always meant to be tested and proved. Here's what James Allen has shown us across these 10 chapters. We are not the helpless victims of circumstance. We are the makers of our circumstances, because we are the makers of our character, and character is destiny. Every thought we think, every deed we do, every habit we cultivate or abandon, all of these are choices freely made that set in motion causes whose effects will return to us with perfect and mathematical justice. To understand this is to be freed from resentment, from complaint, from the exhausting habit of blaming the world for what is ours to take responsibility for. And with that understanding comes an extraordinary invitation. Because if our circumstances are the product of our deeds, and our deeds flow from our character, and our character is built thought by thought and choice by choice in the ordinariness of daily life, then the power to build a different destiny is here, right now, in this moment. In whatever small act of will or self-discipline or honest effort you are capable of today, the science of self-control, the training of the will, the diligent attention to small things, the building of the mind on principles of justice, rectitude, sincerity, and kindness, the cultivation of deep concentration, the practice of meditation, the holding of a clear and burning purpose. These are not exotic or out-of-reach achievements. They are the ordinary work of a human being who has decided to become, slowly and patiently and with full attention, the best version of what they were created to be. And that work, Alan promises us, is accompanied every step of the way by joy, not the shallow, flickering joy of indulgence and ease, which is soon spent and leaves emptiness behind, but the deep, growing, permanent joy that comes from having used your one life well, from having built something real, from having mastered day by day and year by year the greatest challenge that any human being will ever face, the mastery of your own destiny. Go forward with that understanding, with that courage, with that quiet, steady resolve. And remember what James Allen knew so well, that the force which built the stars and holds the planets in their courses is the same force that works through your every honest effort and your every sincere desire to grow. You are not separate from the law of the universe. You are an expression of it. The path is open. It always was. If this audiobook has moved you, challenged you, or given you something valuable to carry into your life, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Your subscription tells us that this work matters to you, and it helps us to bring more timeless books like this one to more people who are searching for depth, for wisdom, and for the kind of ideas that last. Click the subscribe button now. Leave a comment below telling us which part of this book spoke to you most. And share this recording with anyone in your life who you feel is ready for these ideas. We will meet again soon with another book, another voice, another invitation to think more deeply and live more fully. Until then, thank you for listening, and keep building.